Tonight, we will explore some of the most fascinating art heists in history. Carefully planned thefts from museums, galleries, and private collections around the world, many of them still unsolved to this day. As you relax and unwind, you will move slowly through each story, the quiet halls before the theft, the patient planning, the moment something valuable slipped out of a frame and out of the world. Some of these mysteries were solved within the year, others remain open, the paintings still missing, the empty spaces on museum walls left as quiet reminders of what once hung there. There is no need to stay awake for every detail. Simply listen, rest, and let these stories of vanished art gently guide you towards sleep. The Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist. It is the early hours of March the 18th, 1990, in Boston, Massachusetts. St. Patrick's Day has just ended, and the city is quiet the way cities get after a celebration, streets a little wet from rain, streetlights soft and blurry, the last few people long gone home. On a quiet corner near the Fenway, behind a wall of ivy, sits a building that looks more like an old Italian palace than a museum. This is the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum, built not by a company or a city, but by one woman. Isabella Stewart Gardner spent years traveling through Europe, buying paintings and art almost entirely because she loved them. When she died in 1924, she left the museum to the public, but with one unusual rule written into her will. Nothing inside could ever be moved or taken away. The collection had to stay exactly as she left it, forever. Inside, that night, 2 security guards are on duty, young and still learning the job. One of them, it's said, would sometimes let friends in after hours just to look around. A small habit. It seems harmless until it isn't. At 1:24 in the morning, a buzzer rings at a side door. Through the small window, the guard sees 2 police officers standing outside. Their uniforms look neat. Their badges catch the light. There's been some trouble nearby, they say. They just need to come in and take a look. It's against the rules to let anyone in without approval. But these are police officers, or they certainly look like it, so the guard doesn't think twice. He opens the door. It is the last easy decision he will make that night. The 2 men step inside, calm and unhurried. They ask the young guard to step away from his desk, just a routine check, they say. He does. And then, quietly, they tell him he's under arrest. He's confused. There's no real reason given, but he doesn't resist. They handcuff him. Then they call for the second guard, who comes down from his rounds, sees his co-worker in handcuffs, and is arrested in exactly the same calm, quiet way. Neither guard presses the emergency button under the desk. It's within reach the whole time. But everything about these 2 men feels official, feels safe, feels like nothing more than an inconvenience. That small trust is the only thing the thieves ever really needed. The guards are led down a stairwell to the basement, and there, away from any window or camera, they're handcuffed to pipes on opposite sides of the room. Their eyes are covered with tape, and when they ask what's happening, one of the men leans down and says, quietly, "This is a robbery, gentlemen. Not to worry, you will not be hurt." Upstairs, the museum is empty and dark, just the sound of rain outside and the slow tick of an old building settling into the night. The 2 men move without rushing. There's something almost strange about it. They don't run, they don't whisper urgently to each other the way you'd expect. They walk, they take their time, they know exactly where they're going, because they've clearly studied the layout of this museum before, maybe visited it, maybe watched it from outside, maybe walked its halls as ordinary guests, taking note of which rooms had cameras and which didn't. They start in the Dutch room, a quiet gallery on the 2nd floor filled with paintings from the Netherlands. And here, hanging on the wall, is a small dark painting of a boat tossed on a stormy sea, the only seascape the Dutch painter Rembrandt ever made. It's called The Storm on the Sea of Galilee. The men take it down from the wall, and instead of carefully removing it from its frame, they simply cut it out with a knife, the canvas peeling away from the gold edges like skin from a fruit. Next to it hangs another Rembrandt, a small portrait known as A Lady and Gentleman in Black. This, too, is cut from its frame. In the same room hangs a painting by the Dutch master Johannes Vermeer called The Concert. Vermeer painted very few pictures in his life. Only a small handful survive today, which makes this one almost unthinkably rare. It too comes down off the wall, and it too is cut free. The men keep moving. A small etching by Rembrandt, no larger than a postcard, is taken as well. Then they move toward a Chinese bronze beaker, thousands of years old, sitting quietly on a stand. It goes into their bag too, almost as an afterthought. Downstairs, in another gallery, hang several drawings by the French artist Edgar Degas, quick, delicate sketches of horses and jockeys, the kind of art that looks almost unfinished, like a single breath caught on paper. 5 of these are taken as well. And near the museum's grand courtyard, there's a small bronze eagle finial, the ornamental piece, that once sat on top of a flagpole from a Napoleon-era French flag. One of the men tries to pry it loose from its mount. It doesn't come easily. There's the low scrape of metal against metal in the empty gallery, over and over, until finally it gives way. All of this, the cutting, the prying, the walking from room to room, takes time, not minutes. The 2 men are inside the museum for 81 minutes in total, long enough to work slowly, long enough to make choices. They pass by other famous, valuable paintings, entirely a Titian, a Michelangelo drawing, and leave them completely untouched. Whatever they came for, they seem to know exactly what it is. Down in the basement, the 2 guards can hear footsteps above them, muffled through the floor. They don't know what's being taken. They don't know how long they'll be down there. All they can do is wait in the dark, wrists cuffed to old iron pipes, listening. Finally, near 3 in the morning, the footsteps stop. The men leave the way they came, back out through the side door on Palace Road, carrying paintings worth more than anyone in that building could fully imagine. They make 2 trips to a car parked outside, load everything in, and drive off into the last dark hour before sunrise. The guards remain handcuffed in the basement for hours. It isn't until the next shift arrives, later that morning, that anyone realizes something is wrong. When the new guards finally make their way through the museum, they find empty frames hanging on the walls, some of them cut clean, some of them simply left dangling open, like little doors that lead nowhere. Word spreads quickly. Investigators arrive, and slowly, as the day goes on, the full scale of what happened becomes clear. 13 pieces of art are gone. Rembrandt, Vermeer, Degas, a Chinese bronze, a French flag ornament. Together, they are worth more than any art theft in history, later estimated at over $500 million. And here is where the story becomes strange, because unlike most crimes, this one never really ends. No arrests were ever made. None of the missing paintings have ever been recovered. The 2 men who walked calmly through the Gardner Museum that night have never been identified with any certainty, despite thousands of tips, years of investigation, and a reward that eventually grew to $10 million for information leading to the art's return. Because of Isabella Stewart Gardner's original will, the one that said nothing in her collection could ever be moved, the museum was not allowed to simply rearrange the galleries to hide what was missing. Instead, the empty frames were left exactly where the paintings used to hang. They are still there today, more than 3 decades later. Visitors walk past a blank rectangle of wall where a Vermeer once hung, and an empty frame where Rembrandt's only seascape used to be. Some nights, the museum's night guards still walk past those same quiet galleries, the same soft creak of old wooden floors, the same rooms Isabella Stewart Gardner filled with things she loved. And somewhere out there, in an attic, a warehouse, a private collection, no one knows 13 pieces of stolen art are still sitting in the dark, waiting the way they have been waiting for over 30 years, for someone to finally bring them home. The Green Vault Heist. It is very early on a Monday morning, the 25th of November, 2019, in the old city of Dresden, Germany. The streets are empty and cold, the kind of quiet that settles over a city just before dawn, when even the earliest workers haven't left their homes yet. At the center of the city stands the Royal Palace, a huge stone building that has stood for hundreds of years, survived wars, bombings, and the slow turning of centuries. Inside one wing of the palace is a room unlike almost any other room in the world. It's called the Green Vault, and it was built nearly 300 years earlier by a ruler named Augustus the Strong, a man known for his love of beautiful, extravagant things. He filled this vault with treasures, jeweled figurines, golden goblets, carved crystal bowls, and diamonds. Thousands and thousands of diamonds, set into brooches, crowns, and ornaments, so old and so rare that no one could ever really replace them if they were lost. On this particular morning, at around 10 minutes to 5, something happens a short distance from the museum. A small fire starts in a power box nearby, deliberately set, though almost no one notices at first. It's just a flicker of orange light in a quiet street. But that fire has one very specific purpose. It knocks out the power to the streetlights just outside the museum, and for a few important minutes, the area around the Green Vault falls into darkness. Nearby, there is also a window. It's high up, in a spot that the museum's own security cameras can't quite see, a small blind spot in an otherwise carefully watched building. And on top of that, there is something else working in the thieves' favor. The day before, an alarm near that same window had gone off for reasons no one is entirely sure of. Security staff had turned it off to deal with it and simply never turned it back on. So now, in the dark, with the cameras blind and the alarm switched off, two men move toward that upper window. They're already wearing masks. They bring with them a hydraulic cutting tool, the same kind of heavy equipment used to cut through metal on construction sites, and they use it to slowly force apart the iron bars protecting the window. It doesn't happen quickly or quietly, but there's no one close enough to hear it, and no camera watching to see it. Once the bars give way, the two men climb through, dropping down into the museum, into the jewel room of the Green Vault. Ahead of them, glowing faintly under the low emergency lighting, are the display cases' thick glass, built to protect exactly this kind of treasure. The men raise axes and swing. It takes several hard blows, at least 9 of them, before the reinforced glass finally gives way and shatters across the floor. And then, calmly, the two men begin reaching inside, gathering jewelry as quickly as they can, a diamond brooch, encrusted with dozens of individual stones, a diamond epaulette, shaped like the ornamental shoulder piece of an old royal uniform, glittering even in the dim light. Piece after piece, they take 21 items in total, each one so heavily set with diamonds that together the entire hall holds more than 4,300 stones. It's worth noting what they left behind. One of the most famous diamonds in the entire collection, a rare, enormous green diamond known simply as the Dresden Green, was not even in the building that night. It happened to be on loan to a museum in New York at the time, which meant, without anyone planning it that way, it was the one treasure the thieves could never have reached even if they'd wanted to. The whole theft, from the moment the glass shatters to the moment the men climb back out through the same broken window, takes only a few minutes. Outside, a car is already waiting nearby, a car the men had quietly altered days before, changing small details of how it looked so it wouldn't easily be recognized. They climb in and drive off through the empty streets, while the city is still mostly asleep. Not long after, in an underground parking garage across town, that same car is found burning. The fire destroys whatever evidence might have been sitting inside, and by the time anyone realizes it's connected to the museum robbery, the trail has already gone cold. By sunrise, the museum staff arrive to find shattered glass across the jewel room floor, cases standing empty, a bent iron window frame, and 21 of Saxony's most treasured historic jewels gone. Officials are stunned. One museum leader tells reporters that hour that she can hardly describe how shaken she is by what happened, and that the historical value of what was lost is almost impossible to measure. For nearly 2 years afterward, the case remains open, the jewels nowhere to be found. But slowly, patiently, investigators begin piecing together small details: the altered car, traces left behind at the scene, patterns that lead them toward a large, well-known family in Berlin's criminal underworld called the Remo family. In November of 2021, 2 years almost to the day after the robbery, police raid a series of homes and arrest 6 men connected to the family. The investigation that follows is long and complicated, a trial that eventually stretches on for 47 days, with hundreds of witnesses called to testify. In the end, 5 of the 6 men are convicted. Some of them, as part of their sentencing, agree to help return a portion of what was stolen, and in a quiet, almost happy postscript to the story, some of the jewels battered. A few of the smaller stones missing from their settings are eventually placed back on display in the very same green vault they were taken from. But not everything comes back. Several of the most valuable pieces, including one especially prized stone known as the Saxon White Diamond, are still missing to this day. No one knows exactly where they are broken apart and sold as individual stones, perhaps scattered so completely that they could never be reassembled into what they once were. So the green vault sits today, much as it always has, glowing softly behind reinforced glass in the heart of Dresden's old palace, some of its treasures home again, resting quietly under the light. And somewhere else, out in the world, a few small, precious pieces of that same old collection are still out there, unaccounted for, carrying a history no one alive can fully replace: the Mona Lisa theft. It is Sunday night, the 20th of August, 1911, in Paris, France. Inside the Louvre, one of the largest and most famous museums in the world, the halls are empty and dark, the way they always are once the last visitors have gone home for the day. At this point in history, the Mona Lisa is not yet the painting everyone in the world recognizes. It hangs quietly in a gallery called the Salon Carré, one small portrait among thousands of other paintings, admired by art lovers but not particularly famous outside of them. It's a portrait of a woman with a calm, faint smile, painted by the Italian artist Leonardo da Vinci more than 400 years earlier. That night, a man named Vincenzo Peruggia is somewhere inside the museum. He is Italian, in his late 20s, and he isn't a stranger here. He had worked for the Louvre before, as a handyman, helping to build the very glass protective case that now covers the Mona Lisa. He knows this museum. He knows its hallways, its quiet corners, its patterns. The story, as it's usually told, goes that Peruggia hides somewhere inside the building overnight, perhaps in a closet, perhaps in a maintenance room, and simply waits. Monday is the one day each week the Louvre is closed to the public, used instead for cleaning and small repairs, which means, come morning, there will be far fewer people around. Just a handful of staff moving quietly through nearly empty galleries. Early Monday morning, Peruggia steps out from wherever he's been hiding. He's wearing a white smock, the same kind of simple worker's uniform worn by museum staff, so if anyone happens to glance his way, he simply looks like he belongs there. He walks calmly into the Salon Carré, lifts the Mona Lisa off the wall, and carries it into a nearby stairwell. There, alone, he removes the painting from its wooden frame and its glass case, setting them carefully aside. He wraps the bare wooden panel the Mona Lisa is painted, not on canvas, but on a thin panel of poplar wood in his smock, and tucks it against his body. Then he simply walks out of the museum, through a side door, into the ordinary morning streets of Paris. No alarms, no chase, nothing at all to suggest that anything unusual has happened. And here is the strangest part of the whole story. For almost an entire day, nobody notices. The gallery wall, where the Mona Lisa once hung, now shows only 4 iron pegs and a faint outline in the dust. But the museum is enormous, filled with thousands of works, and paintings are sometimes taken down temporarily to be cleaned or photographed or restored, so the empty space doesn't immediately raise any alarm. It isn't until the next day, Tuesday, that anyone truly questions it. An amateur painter arrives at the museum, hoping to set up his easel near the Mona Lisa to study it. When he finds the space empty, he asks a guard where the painting has gone. The guard, assuming it's simply being photographed upstairs, goes to check. But upstairs, there's no painting there either. Slowly, the truth sets in. The Mona Lisa is gone. Once the theft is confirmed, panic spreads quickly. The Louvre closes its doors for an entire week while police search every inch of the building. News of the theft spreads across France and then across the world. It becomes one of the biggest news stories of the year. Crowds actually begin gathering at the Louvre just to stare at the empty wall where the painting used to hang. The investigation that follows is chaotic. Detectives round up a wide range of suspects, some of them wildly unlikely. At one point, they bring in the poet Guillaume Apollinaire for questioning, and through him, a young, still relatively unknown painter named Pablo Picasso is also questioned, both of them eventually cleared, though the connection to Picasso becomes one of the strangest footnotes in art history. Perugia himself is questioned too, twice in fact, simply because investigators know he once worked at the Louvre, but each time he answers calmly, and each time the police let him go. It doesn't occur to them that the missing painting might be sitting, quite calmly, inside a small trunk in his one-room apartment on the outskirts of Paris, hidden beneath a false bottom he built himself. And that is exactly where the Mona Lisa stays. For 2 full years, while the rest of the world searches for her, wonders about her, prints her face in newspapers again and again, until nearly everyone alive has seen it, the actual painting sits quietly in a wooden box in a small Parisian apartment, wrapped in cloth, waiting. It isn't until the end of 1913 that anything changes. Perugia finally reaches out to an art dealer in Florence, Italy, named Alfredo Geri, using a false name, offering to sell the painting for a large sum of money. He says he wants it returned to Italy, its rightful home, because Leonardo was Italian and, in Perugia's mind, the painting had been unfairly taken by the French. Geri is suspicious, but curious enough to meet. He brings along the director of a nearby gallery to help verify whether the painting is real. And when Perugia unwraps it in front of them, they realize almost immediately that it is. They act calmly, telling Perugia they'll need a little time to arrange payment and quietly contact the police the moment he leaves. He is arrested shortly after, and soon the full story becomes clear. Whatever patriotic reasons Perugia gave for the theft, investigators also find a notebook of his listing, names of art dealers and collectors, suggesting the idea of selling the painting had crossed his mind from very early on. Still, when the Mona Lisa is finally returned to France, it is completely unharmed. It goes back on display at the Louvre to enormous crowds, more famous now than it had ever been before the theft. In a strange way, the very crime meant to take the painting away from the world is the same event that made it, forever afterward, the most recognized painting on Earth. Perugia serves a short prison sentence, just a matter of months, and later goes on, quietly, to live an ordinary life. And the Mona Lisa, of course, remains at the Louvre to this day, hanging behind protective glass, watched now by cameras and guards and millions of visitors every single year, all of them standing, for a moment, in front of a painting that once disappeared so completely that, for 2 years, absolutely no one in the world knew where she was. The Carlton Hotel Diamond Heist. It is the last Sunday morning in July 2013 on the French Riviera. The town of Cannes is warm and bright, the kind of soft, sun-filled morning that draws people out onto the promenade to walk slowly along the water, coffee in hand, in no particular hurry to be anywhere. Along the seafront sits the Carlton Hotel, tall, white and elegant, with striped awnings and a long history of hosting film stars and royalty. It's the kind of building that seems to belong more to old movies than to real life. In fact, it once did belong to one decades earlier. It served as a filming location for Alfred Hitchcock's To Catch a Thief, a film about a charming jewel thief on this very stretch of coastline. On this particular July morning, though, life is about to imitate that film almost exactly. Inside the hotel, in a private room just off the lobby, something valuable and beautiful has been laid out for a temporary exhibition. It's a collection of diamonds and fine jewelry from a prestigious diamond house, brought here for wealthy guests and collectors to admire necklaces, bracelets, rings, all of it catching the soft light coming through the windows. Security for the display is light. No armed guards, just a quiet, elegant room meant to feel safe and inviting rather than fortified. At around 11:30 in the morning, a man walks calmly into the hotel lobby. He's wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a scarf wrapped loosely around the lower half of his face. In his hand, he's carrying a handgun. He moves toward the room where the jewelry is displayed. There's no dramatic struggle, no shouting, no chase through the hallways. He simply walks in, and in less than a minute, gathers as much of the jewelry as he can, sweeping it into a bag, and walks back out, through the same lobby he came in through, out into the bright Riviera sunlight. By the time hotel staff and the few guests nearby fully register what has happened, the man is already gone, melting into the crowd of tourists and cars along the seafront. Police arrive quickly, but there's very little for them to go on. No struggle, no real confrontation. Just a single man, in and out in under a minute, carrying with him one of the largest hauls of stolen jewelry in modern European history. At first, investigators estimate the value of what's missing at around $53 million. But over the following day, as museum and gallery experts help catalogue exactly what was taken, that number nearly triples. By Monday, French authorities announced the true value, around $136 million in stolen diamonds and jewelry, making it one of the largest jewel heists ever recorded anywhere in the world. What makes the story even stranger is that this isn't the first time the Carlton Hotel has been robbed. Nearly 20 years earlier, in the 1990s, armed men had stormed the hotel's jewelry store and made off with a smaller, though still enormous, haul of diamonds. Those thieves were never caught either. It's almost as though the hotel itself, with its old glamour and its history tied to a film about a jewel thief, keeps quietly attracting real ones. Investigators eventually come to suspect that the man behind the Carlton robbery may be connected to a loosely organized international group of jewel thieves known, almost like something out of fiction, as the Pink Panthers, a name given to them by police years earlier, after one member was found to have hidden a stolen diamond inside a jar of face cream, echoing a scene from an old Pink Panther film. The group is known for exactly this kind of heist: quiet, fast, almost gentle in its lack of violence, focused entirely on getting in, taking what they came for, and disappearing before anyone can react. But knowing who might be responsible and proving it are two very different things. Despite an extensive manhunt across France, no one is ever formally convicted for the Carlton robbery. The diamonds themselves are never recovered. Whatever became of them broken apart and resold as individual stones, most likely, since a matching photographed diamond is far too recognizable to sell whole, is something only the thief or thieves will ever really know. Life along the Riviera, of course, goes on. The Carlton Hotel still stands exactly where it always has, its white facade catching the same soft morning light, guests still strolling the promenade outside with coffee in hand. And somewhere, tucked into the story of this beautiful old building, is a robbery that took less than 60 seconds, walked away with more than $100 million in diamonds, and was never, not even once, fully solved. The Ghent altarpiece panel theft. It is the night of April the 10th, 1934, in the city of Ghent, Belgium. Rain drifts quietly over the narrow streets, and inside St. Bavo's Cathedral, an old stone church that has stood at the center of the city for centuries, everything is dark and silent, the way old churches always seem to be after the last candle has been put out. Inside one of the side chapels sits one of the most important works of art ever created, a huge, folding altarpiece known as the Adoration of the Mystic Lamb, though most people simply call it the Ghent altarpiece. It was painted more than 500 years earlier by two brothers, Hubert and Jan van Eyck, using a technique with oil paint that was, at the time, almost entirely new. The altarpiece is enormous, 20 separate wooden panels, each one painted with extraordinary, glowing detail, showing saints and angels and a peaceful, otherworldly landscape. For centuries, people have traveled from all over the world just to stand in front of it. But this painting has never had an easy history. Over the years, it survived attempts to destroy it, was taken apart and sold off piece by piece, and was even stolen once before, centuries earlier, by soldiers during a war. By 1921, after years of negotiation, the missing panels had finally been returned, and for the first time in more than 100 years, the entire altarpiece stood complete again, exactly as the Van Eyck brothers had painted it. That piece lasts only 14 years. On this particular rainy night, someone climbs into the chapel where the altarpiece stands. The panels are set into a heavy oak frame, braced with iron bars, and mounted higher than an ordinary person could easily reach. Whoever does this must balance carefully on a narrow altar ledge, working in near total darkness, using nothing but feel and patience. Two panels are removed that night. One shows St. John the Baptist. The other, painted on the reverse side of the very same wooden panel, shows a striking scene known as the Just Judges, a group of medieval horsemen, richly dressed, riding together toward the painting's central image of a lamb. Some art historians believe the faces in that panel are actual portraits of powerful men from the 15th century, quietly hidden inside a religious scene. Both panels are removed with surprising care. The rest of the altarpiece is left completely undamaged, as though whoever did this understood exactly how fragile the wood and paint truly were. The next morning, a cathedral worker begins his usual rounds and finds the door to the chapel forced open. When he steps inside, he sees a bare, empty space in the frame where two painted panels should be. The news spreads almost instantly across Belgium. It's an enormous scandal, a piece of the nation's most treasured artwork, stolen from inside its own cathedral. Police investigate the scene, but find no fingerprints, no clear signs of forced entry beyond the door itself, nothing at all to point them toward whoever did this. And then, a note. Left behind on the empty frame, written in French, are the words, "Taken from Germany by the Treaty of Versailles." It seems, at first, to suggest the theft was some kind of political statement, a reference to how the altarpiece had once been seized by Germany during the First World War before being returned. But investigators soon come to believe this note is nothing more than a distraction meant to send them looking in entirely the wrong direction. 19 days after the theft, a letter arrives for the Bishop of Ghent. It demands 1 million Belgian francs in exchange for the missing panels. If the ransom isn't paid, the letter warns, the stolen paintings will be destroyed. The bishop, understandably shaken, is willing to pay, but permission from the government doesn't come, and negotiations drag on through the following weeks. 11 separate ransom letters in total, each one signed only with the initials D.U.A. Then, in a strange, almost trusting gesture, the thief sends one of the 2 panels back. The St. John the Baptist panel is left quietly at the luggage counter of a train station in Brussels, returned completely free of charge, as though to prove that the sender truly does have the other, more valuable piece, the Just Judges, and is capable of returning it too, if only the ransom is paid. But it never is, and that second panel, the Just Judges, is never seen again. Later that same year, in November, a well-known local stockbroker named Arsène Godetier collapses suddenly during a political gathering and dies shortly after. On his deathbed, he tells a companion that he alone knows where the missing panel is hidden, but he dies before he's able to say anything more. When police search through his belongings afterward, they find drafts of the very ransom letters sent to the bishop, written in his own hand. It becomes almost certain, from that moment on, that Godetier was the thief, or at least deeply involved. But knowing who took the panel, and knowing where it actually is, turn out to be 2 very different things. His family and friends insist they know nothing more. No hidden panel is ever found in his home, his office, or anywhere connected to him. To this day, nearly a century later, the Just Judges has never been recovered. In its place, the cathedral now displays a carefully painted copy, made by a conservator years later, so close in style and colour that visitors can stand in front of the altarpiece today and see it, at a glance, whole again, even though the original panel is still out there somewhere, hidden in a place only one man ever truly knew, a secret he chose, in the end, to take with him: the Montreal Museum heist. It is the early hours of Labor Day Monday, the 4th of September, 1972, in Montreal, Canada. The night is cool, a welcome change after a hot, humid holiday weekend, and the streets around Sherbrooke Street are quiet, the way a city feels in that stretch of hours after midnight, when even the last late-night stragglers have finally gone home. The Montreal Museum of Fine Arts sits along this street, a grand stone building that, at the time, had recently begun facing money troubles. Parts of the roof are under repair, which means, on this particular night, there is a construction ladder left up on top of the building, and, more importantly, one section of skylight has had its alarm switched off while workers finish the job. Nearby, 3 men move quietly between the museum and a church next door. One of them straps on a pair of climbing spikes, the same kind telephone linemen use to scale wooden poles, and climbs a tree growing between the 2 buildings up onto the museum roof. Once there, he finds exactly what he expected: the ladder and the disabled skylight. He lowers the ladder down to his 2 waiting companions. All 3 make their way up, gather at the skylight, and with the alarm switched off and no one watching, climb inside, lowering themselves down into the gallery below on a length of rope, nearly 50 feet long, like something out of an old adventure film. Inside, on the 2nd floor, one of the museum's security guards has just finished his nightly rounds. He's on his way to make himself a cup of tea, looking forward to a quiet end to a quiet shift, when the 3 masked men appear in front of him. He doesn't move quickly enough for their liking. One of the men raises a sawed-off shotgun and fires 2 blasts into the ceiling, not aimed at anyone, but loud enough, close enough, to make the point immediately clear. The guard drops to the floor. The 2 remaining guards, hearing the shots, come running toward the noise, only to be met by the same armed men and quickly tied up and gagged alongside their co-worker. With all 3 guards subdued and no way to raise an alarm, the thieves move calmly through the galleries. They know, it seems, roughly what they're looking for. Painting after painting comes down off the walls, a landscape by Rembrandt, valued alone at around $1 million, along with works by Rubens, Delacroix, Corot, and Gainsborough. They also gather smaller, easier to carry items, bits of jewelry, small decorative figurines, sweeping them into bags as they move from room to room. In total, they spend around 2.5 hours inside the museum, slow, unhurried work, much like an ordinary night shift for the very guards they've tied up. It isn't until an alarm is finally triggered elsewhere in the building that the thieves decide it's time to leave. They gather everything. They've taken 18 paintings and nearly 40 pieces of jewelry and small artifacts and simply walk out on foot, disappearing down Sherbrooke Street into the last dark hour before sunrise. No getaway car, no dramatic chase. Just 3 men walking calmly away into the quiet Montreal night, carrying millions of dollars of stolen art in their arms. When the guards are finally found and freed, and police arrive to survey the damage, the scale of what's happened becomes clear. It's the largest art theft in Canadian history, worth around $2 million at the time, a number that would grow to tens of millions in today's term. For weeks afterward, there's an unusual kind of contact between the thieves and the museum. Letters and phone calls come in, some hinting at a ransom, some simply taunting. At one point, an envelope arrives containing a photograph of all the stolen artwork, laid out together, as if to prove they truly have it all postmarked from the port of Montreal, a detail that leads investigators to wonder, without ever confirming, whether organized crime might be involved. As a strange gesture of good faith, one of the smaller stolen paintings, a work believed at the time to be by the Flemish painter Jan Bruegel the Elder, is quietly returned. But negotiations for the rest go nowhere. And slowly, over the following weeks and months, the contact fades away entirely. To this day, more than 50 years later, none of the other paintings have ever resurfaced. No one was ever arrested. No one was ever even formally identified as a suspect. Beyond a description, 3 men, slender build, longish hair, 2 speaking French, 1 speaking English, details gathered from guards who spent that whole long night face down on the gallery floor, listening to footsteps and quiet conversation drifting past them in the dark. Experts who study art theft often say that most stolen paintings eventually resurface, sometimes decades later, when someone finally tries to sell them. So perhaps, somewhere, a Rembrandt landscape and a handful of other quiet old-world paintings are still hanging in a home, or sitting boxed away in an attic, their true history known only to whoever kept them waiting, the way stolen things often do, for a day that may or may not ever come, when the truth quietly finds its way back into the light. The Pirate and the Last Judgment. It is the spring of 1473, somewhere in the cold, grey waters of the North Sea, off the coast of England. This is a story from long before museums, before security guards, before glass display cases, a story from a time when some of the most valuable things in the world travelled not behind locked doors, but on the open decks of wooden ships, at the mercy of weather, distance, and whoever else happened to be sailing the same waters. Earlier that year, in the city of Bruges, in what is now Belgium, a painter named Hans Memling had just finished one of the most extraordinary works of his career. It's a triptych, a painting made of 3 connected panels showing an enormous, vivid scene of the Last Judgment. Souls being weighed, the saved rising toward heaven, the damned pulled down into darkness below. It had been commissioned by a wealthy banker named Angelo Tani, who worked for the powerful Medici family of Florence, and it was meant to be shipped home to Italy to hang in a quiet chapel near Florence as a gift of faith and family pride. To get it there, the painting is loaded onto a galley called the St. Matthew, along with a hold full of other valuable cargo, fine wool, leather, furs, tapestries. The ship set sail from Bruges, following the coastline south toward the English Channel, and from there onward to Italy. It never arrives. Sailing the same waters that spring is a man named Paul Beneke, a sea captain from the port city of Danzig, what is today Gdansk, in Poland. Beneke isn't simply a criminal chasing easy plunder. He's what's known as a privateer, a captain given permission by his home city to seize ships belonging to their enemies as something close to an act of war. At the time, the Hanseatic League, the powerful trading alliance that Danzig belonged to, is locked in conflict with England, and though the St. Matthew is officially registered to an Italian merchant, it is, in truth, sailing under English ownership. That, to Beneke, is more than enough reason. His ship, the Peter von Danzig, closes in on the St. Matthew somewhere along the English coast. There's no way to know exactly how the encounter unfolds, whether there was a long chase across open water, or whether the smaller ship simply had no real chance to escape. But by the time it's over, Beneke's men have boarded the St. Matthew, taken control of it, and begun hauling its cargo back to their own ship, the wool, the furs, the tapestries, and, among it all, 3 heavy wooden panels wrapped for the long voyage. Memling's painting of the Last Judgment. Beneke has the captured ship towed back across the sea, all the way to the German port of Stade, and eventually, the stolen cargo makes its way home to Danzig. Word of what's happened spreads quickly through Europe's trading world. Angelo Tani, furious at the loss of a painting he'd commissioned with such care, appeals through official channels, even bringing the matter before the Pope's own court, arguing that this was simple theft, dressed up as wartime justice. Even the Duke of Burgundy himself writes a letter to the city of Danzig, demanding the painting's return, but Danzig refuses. Officials there argue that the seizure was a lawful act of war, carried out during an active conflict with England, and that the painting, along with everything else taken from the St. Matthew, is rightfully theirs to keep. The painting never goes back to Italy. Instead, it's given to a church in Danzig St. Mary's, where it's placed on display, and where, remarkably, it remains for centuries afterward, through wars, occupations, and the slow turning of history around it. At one point, more than 200 years later, the Russian Tsar Peter the Great, visiting the city during a war of his own, becomes fascinated by the painting, and quietly hopes Danzig might simply hand it over to him as a gift. They refuse him too. Centuries later still, Napoleon's army marches through the city and takes the painting all the way to Paris, mistakenly believing it to be the work of an entirely different painter. After Napoleon's fall, it's carried off once more, this time to Berlin, before finally, after all of that wandering, it's returned once again to the city where Paul Beneke first brought it home. Today, the painting still hangs in Gdansk, in the National Museum, in the very city its stolen panels were first delivered to more than 500 years ago. Historians now consider this one of the very first widely documented art thefts on record, long before the word heist even existed, long before museums as we know them were built to protect anything at all. And somewhere in that story is a simple, almost timeless truth, that beautiful, valuable things have always tempted people to take them, by whatever means available: a knife through a canvas, a key through a side door, or, in this case, a wooden ship, a rough sea, and a captain who simply decided that what he found on board was now his to keep. The scream theft. It is very early on the morning of February the 12th, 1994, in Oslo, Norway. Just a short drive away, in the town of Lillehammer, the Winter Olympics are about to open, and for a few days, the eyes of the entire world are turned toward this quiet, snowy corner of Scandinavia. But inside Oslo's National Gallery, none of that celebration matters yet. It's still dark outside, the streets covered in a thin layer of winter snow, the city mostly asleep, saving its energy for the excitement that's about to begin 100 miles north. Inside the gallery hangs one of the most recognizable paintings in the world, Edvard Munch's The Scream, painted a century earlier, showing a lone, wide-eyed figure standing on a bridge, hands pressed to the sides of its face, the sky behind it swirling in streaks of orange and red. Munch actually painted several versions of this image over the years, but this one, a fragile pastel version from 1893, is considered one of Norway's most treasured possessions. Just before 6:30 in the morning, two men approach the side of the building carrying a ladder. It's still fully dark. They lean the ladder against the wall, beneath a second-floor window, and begin to climb. On their first attempt, the ladder slips, and one of them falls. But they try again, more carefully this time, and this time it holds. At the window, they don't waste time. Using simple wire cutters, they break through the glass, reach inside, and find the Scream hanging on the gallery wall. There's no elaborate plan for removing it delicately. They simply cut the wire, holding it in place, lift it free, and climb back down. The entire theft, start to finish, takes less than a minute. As they leave, almost as a kind of joke, they leave behind a small postcard inside the gallery. On it, they've written a short message: "Thanks for the poor security." An alarm does go off almost immediately, and police arrive within minutes. But by then, the two men are already gone, disappearing into a waiting car and vanishing into the quiet, snow-covered streets of Oslo before officers even reach the gallery doors. The museum's director, speaking to reporters just hours later, says quietly that this is Norway's most valuable painting and that it would be almost impossible to sell. That turns out to be exactly true. About a month after the theft, the National Gallery receives a letter demanding $1 million for the painting's safe return. But officials are unsure whether the demand is even genuine, and after some consideration, they choose not to pay. Instead, they turn to Scotland Yard's Art and Antiques Squad in London for help, and together with Norwegian police, a quiet plan begins to take shape. Undercover officers reach out, posing as buyers interested in purchasing the painting privately, offering, instead of the $1 million demanded, a smaller sum of around $250,000. It's a strange kind of negotiation. This slow, careful back and forth between police pretending to be criminals and criminals slowly beginning to trust them. Eventually, the deal is arranged to take place at a seaside hotel in the small coastal town of Åsgård Strand, about 40 miles south of Oslo, a town, fittingly, where Munch himself once had a cottage and painted many of his most famous works. There, in early May, almost 3 months to the day after the painting first disappeared, police make their move. The Scream is recovered completely undamaged, still in the same fragile condition it had been in the night it was taken. 4 men are eventually arrested and convicted in connection with the theft. Among them a former professional soccer player turned art thief, well known to Norwegian police for a string of earlier, smaller thefts. He later confesses that at one point during those 3 months, the painting had simply been hidden inside a secret compartment built into a living room table, sitting quietly in an ordinary home, while half of Norway searched for it. The Scream is returned to the National Gallery not long after, restored to its place on the wall, its fragile pastel surface untouched by everything it had been through. And in a strange twist that seems to follow this particular painting, a second version of the Scream would be stolen again, a decade later, this time from a different museum entirely, in a bold daylight robbery recovered again, eventually, though not without its own long and complicated story. But this first theft, quick and almost gentle by comparison, remains one of the strangest in art history, simply because of its timing, a masterpiece, disappearing from a locked gallery on the very same morning the whole world's attention turned toward the mountains just outside the city, as if, for one single winter morning, Norway's most famous painting decided to slip quietly out the window while no one was watching, and see a little of the world for itself before coming calmly home. You can let all of that go now, there is nothing left to solve or explain. Somewhere tonight the great museums are quiet and dark, and the frames are still on the walls, some full, some empty, and the guards are walking their same slow rounds, and the paintings that are still missing are resting somewhere too, wherever they are, and the ones that came home are hanging exactly where they belong, and the night is deep and full of rest.